So we've just added our 2 parts of green, which was our, in our 8 measures, which makes up our 2 parts. Our 8 measures, we did 2 of lucerne chaff. Just down here, 2 of lucerne chaff. Where is it? It's already mixed in. 2 of lucerne chaff, 3 of oat hay, and then 3 measures of our garden pruning. So just to give you an idea of the diversity, you've got London Plain, you've got Marri, you've got Jarrah here, you've got Bottle Brush, there's lavender cuttings here, there's some mulberry over here. You know, there's a few other things I don't quite recognise. There's some Leucaena. That's a really good one because it's you can already see it's really breaking down. And this, oh, look at this. I'm going to show you this. Okay, so we were just talking before about pioneer species trees. So Tagersasti, Leucaena, wattles, these sorts of things. Now they suck atmospheric nitrogen and pump it into the soil at a very fast rate. Leucaena is one of those trees, and this is Leucaena here, I believe. It's very closely related. Oh no, it might be a wattle. No, this is a wattle of some sort. The Leucaena's got bigger leaves. But anyway, as you can see, this was pruned about a week and a half ago. So it was green then. And look, see how it's gone sort of almost white? This is the fungi starting to take over and break this down already. And it's just been sitting in a bag. So these pioneer trees are absolutely top-notch stuff to add to either compost or, you know, in say your food forest or on swales on broadacre farms, anything like that for chop and drop. So literally just chop it, drop it on the ground, add your microbes, and it'll break down to soil at a very high nitrogen soil very quickly. So this is interesting to see. So we've added our 2 parts of green. We've watered it. Now watering, you need to add a lot of water, especially in summertime. It's probably probably close to #1 mistake that people make when they're building this stuff. When they're assembling it, they don't add enough water. They think, oh, it's just too much. A 3 cubic metre pile of compost will hold almost 1,000 litres of water. So 3,000 litres of organic material will hold almost 1,000 litres of water. And that's exactly the same when it turns into soil in your paddock or pasture or forest or whatever. 1/3 of good soil is that's the water holding capacity. 4 measures of manure. We're going to put in. Just grab the shovel. We're going to put in 2 measures of cow and sheep manure mix. This is a good hot. This is fresh. So it's very high nitrogen. We're going to put 1 measure of. It's pretty old horse manure, but there'll be some nitrogen in there. And we'll put 1 measure from the old chookyard waste. Big lumps like that. Break it up. You see the white bit there? See that there? That's why you want cow manure, because there's microbes in there that are already working hard to lock up the nitrogen and the carbon and trying to turn it into soil. Okay? See all that white stuff? That's a thermal bacteria. So a bacteria that likes really hot conditions. So that's a see that big lump? You don't want big lumps like that. I'm going to break it up because it wants to be mixed as best as possible. That's 1 measure. That's 2 measures. Nice even spread. Before I add the other 2 measures of manures, I'm just going to go ahead and break up these bigger chunks. Third measure will be some fairly old. As you can see, look at how dry that stuff is. Fairly old horse manure, so won't be quite as high nitrogen. And this is where really the art comes into it, because the science will tell you there's all the sort of figures. Horse manure, I think, is usually considered a ratio of about 15 to 16 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. A good compost is 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, so you can sort of get the idea. You use less horse manure and more straw to get to that 30 to 1 ratio. But this is where that's the science. Where art comes into it is looking at that horse manure and going, you know what, that's not fresh. That's going to be less nitrogen and more carbon. So we may, and this is where the art comes into it, at the first turn in 8 days' time, we may need to adjust. We may need to add a little more manure to get the nitrogen up, and we'll monitor this. I'll show you at the end with a temperature thermometer. So at the end of 8 days, when we turn it the first time, we may need to add a little bit more nitrogen to this pile just to bring the temperature up. If you get a close up of this, really this is almost a compost already. So the chip there was straw and wood chips and branches were in a big pile here. The chooks were on here for less than a month, and this is what they've left behind: shredded, chopped and dropped, eaten all the bugs, and they've done lots of manure. But the manure has obviously been champed and scratched around and mixed with other soil, so it won't be as high. It obviously won't be anywhere near as much nitrogen in this chook yard stuff as just droppings from, say, a concrete floor. But the diversity in here is just spectacular, because there's obviously chook yard, scraps, food scraps. There's ash and charcoal from the fireplace. There's obviously leaves and straw and any feed that they've scratched in and grains and whatnot. So this is a very high quality addition to any compost, but it'll be less nitrogen in it than just pure chicken manure. So this is where the art comes into it as well, sort of looking and going, you know what, I think we need to add a bit more fresh cow manure to bring the nitrogen ratios up in that 3-2-1 mix. So I'm going to get one measure of this. Now we'll water that in. That's our 3-2-1 mixture. Once this is really well watered in, we'll start the process all over again with our straw next. Remember, plenty of water, especially when it's so dry like it's February now, in the middle of summer, or end of summer, no rain in 6 months. All the material is really dry. You'd use much less water if you're making compost in the middle of winter when there's obviously been rain around. So, got to factor that into. So we just added our layer of manure, and as I was mentioning, it uses a lot of water, especially in summertime, everything's so dry. So you might look at this and think, oh yeah, that's pretty wet, but then look at this, just under the surface, bone dry. See? Bone dry. So when you're adding the water, you need to really get in there nice and really deep, really mix it in with your, whatever you're using with the water, or if you're just doing it with buckets, for example, you can always sort of pour buckets slowly on. Someone could be mixing it with a pitchfork, but you really need to mix the water in, because it's like in the middle of summer, it's just so dry. So